Hey, welcome to Dan's Model Works. And we're at the clutter zone, the famous clutter zone. And we're working on the racer's wedge. This will hopefully be the last episode for this project, and it's episode number 9. And you know the drill, let's get rid of the box. Alrighty, so the cab is almost complete. I want to do a nasty wash up inside there. I'd like to put a wash on the engine as well. Because remember, this vehicle was made out of junkyard parts. So I'd like to do a little bit more detailing inside the cab. The actual chassis itself, I'm not going to be doing too much more work to that, other than basically attaching the bumper. I think I've got a bumper kicking around I can use for that. I haven't painted the ramps yet, and they're probably going to be one of the first things we work on this episode. And I've got something I'd like to try for those, and we'll see how that works out. And of course, the body of the wedge itself, we've got to paint the underside of it, give that some sort of a primer color. And the marker lights need to be painted, and we're going to have to put some tail lights on it and some tools. And I'm also planning on putting a winch at the very front. So let's get moving. You know, it's funny, it's only been about a week and a half since I worked on this. Normally it would have been about a week, but finishing off the Condor took a little bit more time than I anticipated. But it seems like it's been about a month since I last worked on it, which is kind of strange. At any rate, I should have checked the fit of the ramps earlier on. And as you can see, this piece here tends to interfere with them clipping on. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut a bit of an angle on each of the ramps. And I know that's going to make the ramps handed, but I don't think that's going to be a big deal. So what I have planned for these ramps is I'm going to slosh some silver paint in strategic locations that I think that they would tend to get banged up quite a bit. Then I'm going to put a little bit of Humbrol Mascol on those silver areas. Only then am I going to turn around and I'm going to airbrush it the same color as the body itself. Then when the paint's dry, I'm going to peel off the Mascol, and hopefully that'll give the impression that these ramps have been tossed in the back of the vehicle a few times and have been kind of kicked around an awful lot. And then I might put a little bit of rust on them as well. The main thing is I want these things to look like they've been kind of beat up a bit. Now that their silver paint is dried, I'm just gonna, like I said, I'm gonna put some Mascol on. It's gonna be mostly random, but I just want it to look like these ramps, even though they were probably painted nice when the rest of the wedge was built or repainted. That they've gotten chipped up a lot. All right, the blue paint is dry. Let's take off the Mascol and see how it looks. Assuming it does come off. Okay, that looks pretty good. Certainly looks beat up, which is what I'm looking for. Okay. So I'm going to be putting a little bit of light rust on this, but the idea is, in fact, it is chipped paint, which is what we were looking for. As I mentioned in an earlier episode of this build, I'm going to be putting an air deflector on the top, and it's going to be one of these ones that's kind of like a chrome wing. So it's basically going to go from maybe here and then swoop up. And I'm going to flash up a picture of the sort of thing that I'm hoping to build right about now. There, did it flash? Hopefully. So I'm going to start by pretty much deciding on a width, and I think probably it's going to be just slightly wider than the outside ribs. Maybe something like that. And I'm going to start with this piece of tubing here, and that will give me the lower front edge, because that's actually kind of a round portion. And then what I'm hoping to do is to have an inner form that's going to be the shape of the airfoil, and I'll use that to put some 10 thou styrene on to about the right size and shape, and then there'll be some end plates on the end of it. Once we've got all that done and together, hopefully we'll bare metal foil it. The cross section I'm hoping to achieve is this. And you can see I've transferred it onto this really seriously beefy piece of styrene. I don't know where you can buy a piece of styrene like this. I know there's plastic supply stores that sell plastic for industrial purposes. I got this from an acquaintance who worked for a kitchen cabinet company, and they used this heavy-duty plastic to mold one-piece drawers. So the idea is by using a thick piece like this, I've got something that I can cause my thin plastic to take the right shape of. Now, in order to make two parts that are identical, or as close to identical as I can make them, what I plan on doing is laminating two of these thick pieces of plastic together and creating them at the same time. But how are you going to get them apart, Dan? Now, this is something I've read about. It looks like it should work, but I've never tried it myself. As you can see, I've filed a substantial groove in the back of this. I'm going to put the other piece on, and I'm going to glue them together at this end. And this groove should keep the glue from shooting across and gluing the whole thing together. But once I've done that, then I can work on getting this the part as chewed out as I possibly can before I finally break it free. We'll see how that works. I've let it dry overnight, and as you can see, basically from the notch up to here is still free, and you can see the image of what I want to create there. So the idea is I should be able to follow my outline. It doesn't have to be precise, but what I need is for both pieces to basically be identical. So by having both pieces glued together like this, I should be able to basically create two identical parts. Now I'm going to have to do a little bit of finish up work here at the nose of our air deflector when I chop the parts free, but most of it should be identical by using this method. I've got about half of the shaping done here, and I was about to start using a knife and whittling it down, and then I realized that's going to take forever. So I've got a sanding drum on my mandrel on my Dremel here, and basically I'm just don't want to use too much speed. I'm just going at it like this and working my way down to the shape I want. Now you don't want to go too carried away, or you'll just turn it into a melted blob. Don't know if you can understand that over the Dremel, but basically I'm just grinding it away down to the profile right here. And then I'm gonna use a hand file to get it to the exact shape I want, but this is just gonna get rid of like 99% of it. Right, lots of molten plastic stuck to my arm later. I've got these parts close to where I want them. I'm going to finish off getting the shape I want with a hand file. The tricky part's going to be getting the round front, but we'll see. Alright, I've got most of this part here refined. And now what I really need to do is to put a nice round edge on this. Hopefully around a radius that's going to match the piece of styrene that I'm planning on representing the front of our wing. Now, of course, this is just the former that's going to, give the shape to everything. So it's important that we get this right. Hopefully the shape of the part I'm trying to achieve is starting to show here. Basically, this area here is all waste. The fang portion here is what we want. Now, before I snap this off of my sprue, so to speak, this is basically the radius I want to have for the front of my air deflector. And as we can see, it's quite a bit smaller than the part I have. So I try to give you guys a good view of it. So before I amputate the sprue, I'm going to file this in order to get as close as I can to this diameter. I've just snapped off the sprue. And as you can see, these parts are, well, they're probably about 98% identical. And all I really have left to do is to just sand this into a round shape. But by having them glued together on a sprue, so to speak, I was able to hold everything into alignment, and this is all I've got to worry about here. And that's my two formers for my air deflector wing to go on top of our racer's wedge. Hopefully this is starting to make sense. So this is our framework. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some 10 thou styrene. I'm going to give it a bit of a pre-bend first. And I'm going to glue it on here. I'm not going to try wrapping it around this really tight bend here. But once I've got that on, I'm just going to do some filler at the front just to round it up. And that should give us our wing airfoil shape. So when it goes on top of the cab, it's going to be like this. Now we'll still need to put end plates on it because most of these spoilers like this have got end plates on them. Hopefully it's starting to be clear as to what I'm trying to do. This is the skim on the top of our air deflector here. And as you can see, I'm not even going to try to wrap it around this really tight curve because I just don't think it's going to work. But as you can see, I've really introduced a serious bend in the plastic here, basically wrapped around, I think it was an X-Acto blade or an X-Acto handle. So I'm going to trim this off, and then I'm going to use the same piece of styrene. And this is 10 thou styrene for the underside. And for the nose, I'm just going to do a little bit of sanding, use a little bit of putty, and hopefully we'll get a nice round profile on the front there. And here's our rear skin, I should say. I guess best way to describe it. This is the front. That's the rear. The rear skin is now on. Ass skin? I don't know. Anyway, once it is set up, in particularly right here on this seam, once that's set up, I'm going to trim it, and then I'm going to put some putty on here so that I can get a slightly better rounding on the front, and then I'm going to turn my attention to the end plates. But this has actually gone together better than I thought it was going to. This is one of the things that I was really kind of nagging me, saying, God, am I going to be able to build this thing? So there is our basic shape all taken care of. Took 2 or 3 applications of putty before I was happy with this round front here. Next step will be to put the end caps on. Once again, it's just going to be 10 thou styrene for that. And then I'm going to cover probably 90% of it with bare metal foil. And the rest of it will be chrome silver. There it is, the finished wind deflector. Still needs some legs underneath it, but now I thought I had dusted my part really well, but apparently there was a tiny bit of dust. So anytime you're using Bare metal foil, remember, the slightest bit of dust is going to show. You know what? I'm not going to worry about it because, once again, this is a junkyard dog. And I think it looks pretty cool, considering it's just bits of styrene tacked together. I'm holding in my hand an assortment of objects. This should be recognizable as a brake booster and a master cylinder. And this actually came from Revol Monogram's Super Duty kit. And this is just laziness on my part. I suppose I could have scratch built the sucker, but I went and hacked it out of the firewall. So that's what that is. This guy here is the winch that was originally on the front of the racing van, the other MPC kit. And I'm going to do a little bit more detailing on it. This is the motor, and this part here is the bit where the cable comes out. Hopefully I'm going to be putting kind of a spiral cable coming off it and a controller. And these two blocks here, one of these is going to be very rounded, and it's going to be the windshield washer tank, and the other one is going to serve as the battery. So that's our battery put together. Now that twin chunks of thick plastic glued together that I started with, all I did was just file it till I got it basically square. And I don't think it's perfectly square, but hopefully it won't be too noticeable. 2 little stumps of styrene rod glued on the top for our posts, and just 2 strips to serve as the vents. And that's ready to be painted up and put into our engine compartment. And there's our windshield washer bottle. Nice thing about this is you don't have to be nice and square and regular, because these things are blow molded and you usually have anything but a regular shape. The main characteristic we want here is to have all round edges, so it basically looks like a plastic milk jug, really. So what I'll end up doing with this is I'll paint the cap black, and I'm going to use a light blue for maybe the bottom half, bottom third of it, just to give the impression that it's full of windshield washer fluid. I needed to add a few things to our engine compartment here. I've got a brake booster and the master cylinder on the firewall, and you can see I've added the battery and the windshield washer fluid bottle, and I'm also going to be adding a radiator overflow tank. So you're probably wondering, what is this? Now, it's made up of a stack of thick chunks of styrene with a styrene rod on the top. But what is this going to be? Let's look at a couple still shots and see what develops. So now that our cooler is finished, it's just basically going to get glued in here between the seats. Now I figure that gives a little bit more animation and personality to the inside of the truck, because that way they've got their cold drinks or whatever to take to the car show with them. So as you can see here, I've mounted that winch right here, and in order to make the cable, I just took some, I believe it's 2 thou styrene rod from Evergreen, and I wrapped that really tightly around a very small screwdriver handle, and then I passed a soldering iron really close to it. Not enough that I was going to melt it, but enough to give it some memory. And then when I took it off, it had a nice coil like this to it. And I just glued it there, there, and the controller's nothing but a chunk of heavier rod. And I figure all they really need is a handle with a 3-position switch on the end of it. So that's what that is. And that way they can winch a car up on there and they can get at the controller here. I figure maybe there's a small hook or something they snag it onto. So I'm going to give that some black paint and hopefully it'll look okay. One less unobstructed view of that engine I put so much work into. Before I put the cab on, and it's almost impossible to see it. There's only 4 good points of contact under the cab. These 2 spots right here, and these spots right there. So I've put contact cement on those spots, and that way the fact that they might not be an absolute perfect contact patch will hopefully give us some strength. I'm also using the mirrors from the Super Duty kit for this, and they actually have pins that go into the door. I wish I had checked that previously, then I would have drilled those holes long before this stage. Drilling the holes was a hassle, but I think the mirrors are going to be a lot stronger. And if we move on to the roof, you can see here are the support structures for our air deflector. There we go. That is the racer's wedge completed. And there was a huge laundry list of things to be completed on it. And if I had shown you all of them, this video probably would have been about 3 hours long. So I had to cut a lot of stuff out. This project really took a lot of extra effort to bring across the finish line. I think mainly because, like I said, that laundry list of things to be done was just so long. And work's been kind of rough lately, and I've been feeling under the weather. I've had a cold for the last week or so. So I thought this was going to be done about 2.5 weeks ago, and it's only done now. So I'll show you some still shots. This stuff isn't glued in, so I can choose to pose it with the ramps down. The toolbox is not quite the one that comes with the kit. Basically, I took the one that comes with the racer's wedge and made a mold of it, and this is the resin copy, so I can churn out as many toolboxes as I want. So, as you can see, I've done quite a bit of weathering in the back. This is not supposed to be pretty, this is supposed to be useful. So here's the underside, and I guess I probably should have done a little bit of weathering back here. All the weathering seems to be up at the front around the engine. Maybe I'll do that another day. Yeah, right, like that's going to happen. But it certainly was interesting figuring out just what kind of suspension I was going to use in the back. And I think everything is fairly plausible. So overall, I think it's probably about twice as heavy as it would be if it didn't have all those resin parts. And basically the reason it's so heavy is because all the resin parts are solid. Whereas, of course, if it was, made with styrene, all those bits would be hollow. You figure I've got 6 solid resin wheels on there. I've got the engine is solid resin. The seats are solid resin. You know, that's a lot of extra weight. And if you've ever purchased resin parts, you know, you're kind of thinking, geez, this seems awfully heavy. But I'm glad I did it. It's quite neat, and it made use of an old model that otherwise probably would have languished in the old spare parts bin. And thanks for watching, and until next time, just keep on modeling.